keep yourself for God daily, and may tomorrow be as today.
Yes. We good?
Two.
Get started?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the third annual Guardians of the Ankh. The third annual Guardians of the Ankh. I did all three. I've had the pleasure of doing all three. It seems like every time we do the Guardians of the Ankh, it's on the cusp of when certain factions of our own community appears to be putting the Kemetic legacy under fire. When you are familiar with this dialogue that's going on in the community, raise your right hand if you are. Don't be scared. All right, so that's what we got to talk about. That's some of the things that we got to talk about. However, on the other side of the conversation, they just think you're just asking questions. But when questions get accompanied with ridicule, then that's a problem. Right? Because then you start controlling the narrative that what's going on in the community. So today is part 2 of the State of the Communion address. You want to see part 1 with the Sankhu Studios? It was posted about 3 weeks ago. It's under Sankhu. Kheper defends Baba Hiru with powerful scholarship. So the State of the Communion is the communion of black folks. It's the union of black folks, right? Sexy, Kim, and union. It has nothing to do with the body and blood of Christ, like some think did. We're just clever with the word. So, the Guardians of the Ankh. I'm known as the carrier of the Ankh. This beautiful piece of craftsmanship is made by our beloved Baba Hiru up here. Right up front. Now it means a lot to carry this thing. When you see one of us carry this, it means you're the keeper of the life, the keeper of the lifestyle. So this, according to Professor Smalls, goes back 160,000 years in South Africa. Then it's also found 10,000 years in Naswt. Then it's found in Kemet. Then it's found in West Africa. I know some cats out there thinking they can't find no Ankhs in West Africa.
That's right.
It's called the Ankwaba doll.
That's right.
It's a fertility doll that the women wear around their neck, and it still represents life.
That's right.
So anywhere you find it in North Africa, South Africa, East Africa, it still represents life. Some say it represents the clavicle and the collarbone, representing the breathing apparatus. Life, breath is life, right? Some say it represents the womb, the male principle, and the fruit of the offspring. Understand, no matter which definition you go to, they're all correct because it represents life. Right. So when you see one of us up here, this has significant meaning just for me. Right. So understand when we're talking about the Kemetic legacy, we're talking about an umbrella term that consists of up to 14 different traditions that make up the Kemetic legacy. Y'all understand? Yeah. So there's a drum tradition, there's a healing tradition, there's an ancestral tradition, there's a lector priest tradition. Y'all get it? Mm-hmm. So you represent a lifestyle. Let me get back on the mic over here. Is it on? Give Sarnetta some energy in the house. So how many people in the room are new to the Kemetic path, the Kemetic teachings? How many people, do you think it resonates with you that it's something you think you might want to walk or live? Okay. So then this conversation is very pertinent. So I'm going to tell you what you have to look forward to if this is something that you think you resonate with. If you think you resonate with it and you think you're ready to live it, then be prepared to be ostracized. Prepared to be laughed at. That's all a part of it. We've gone from being called Hotepers, Hotep niggas, and the now Egyptomaniacs. That was funny though. See, when you embrace a culture, you embrace what you call a paradigm. A paradigm is a worldview. It is your way of viewing the world through your cultural filter, and it's totally natural. You see the Hebrew Israelites do it. You see the Moors do it. And let's go even to Africa. If you go to Ghana and you go amongst the Ankh people, they're viewing everything through the Ankh filter. Y'all understand that the language, the culture, the dress, the foods is all through that filter, and it's totally natural. You would never go to a Khan person and say, man, how come y'all ain't talking about what's going on in Benin? How come you ain't talking about what's going on with the Yoruba? Why y'all just doing this Khan thing? That sounds crazy, right? They'll just say, son, but we are Khan. And there's no disrespect. It's only when the African American gets initiated into something that we got to be experts in everything. So we got to know Yoruba, we got to know Ankh, we got to know Kemet, we got to know Chinese, we got to know indigenous, we got to know everything about everything. And nothing is ever good enough. We get initiated and people still tell us, you ain't that. You ain't that. It's almost as though someone likes it when we're identity-less.
That's right.
And they want our culture to be just struggle culture. You notice the only time we get along with one another is when we talk about the struggle of black folks, right? So I might as well just get it warmed up for Anthony Browder over here. Get it warmed up. So I know he's going to come up here and he's going to teach a lot of things about what's going on in Kemet and his shrines. But my job is to get you up on the current conversation in the community, because we have to control the perspectives and how we're being perceived. Understand that? So I think, I'll propose, when people go to Kemet and they go look at the temples and they go for the tours, when they come back, a lot of people don't know what to do with that feeling. They're on this high. They're like, oh wow, I've seen this in books, I've seen the pyramids. And they're on this high for like 3 months, and then the high starts wearing off, and then those people don't know what to do. Because they hit the wall before they went to the trip. They hit the wall, and that's why they went on the trip. Then after the trip, what do? You just still do more studying. We're going to always have to keep studying, but they're supposed to be practice. They're supposed to be lifestyle. They're supposed to be living, right? Application, right? So I will propose, after you come back from Kemet, you should visit the temples in America. You should visit the temple of Anu. You should visit the shrine of Maat. You should visit the shrine of Jehuti Heru. You should visit Asar Set in Brooklyn. You should visit Noor Set Temple in Ohio. You should visit Raseki Healing in Georgia. That's a lot of temples, right?
Sure.
Those are the temples of the Reconstructionists. Now, there's a dialogue in our community that people have a problem with the Reconstructionists. And I'm saying, what elders have y'all followed? Because the elders that I follow told us it's all about the Reconstruction, right? Have y'all ever heard of the word Sankhu? Say Sankhu. Now, what does that mean?
To look back.
Say it again. It said go back and fetch it. It didn't say go back and study it. It said go back and get it. That means you came on a journey and you left something, go back and get it. Isn't it your right to go back and get it?
Sure.
If I left my jacket somewhere and I realized that I forgot my jacket, isn't it my right to go back and get it? And on that journey, if I lost some weight and the jacket don't quite fit, don't I got a right to tell and make it to my new size? That's what we're talking about here. So now, Sankofa is a concept known in Ghana. Now, in our culture, in the Metal Nectar, in the Sesh Metal Nectar, we have the word Sarouge. Can y'all say that?
Sarouge.
Sarouge means to restore, to fix what has been broken, to mend what needs to be repaired. Same concept. We got to take some things back. We got to heal. We have to put it back together. In ancient Kemet, the Naswt Bitis, they did 2 things. They did one thing called Smai Tawi. Can y'all say that?
Smai Tawi.
It means the unification of the upper and lower lands. And then they also did Sarouge Ta. Say Sarouge Ta.
Sarouge Ta.
It means the restoration of the lands. Now, Smai Ta was a political thing. Is to get the government in order. Sarouge Ta was about the tradition. See, now, there's thousands of years of history in Kemet, and hundreds of kings. And every time new kings came in, the regimes changed, and certain temples became defunct. Certain holidays and ritual observances weren't being done. So whenever the new Naswt came in, they would say, I want to open that temple. We got to get some priests trained to get that back going. We need to get these holidays back going. We need to get these ceremonies that going. That's the restoration. That is the Saruj. That is the healing. That's the restoration of the traditions of ancient Kemet. Now today, we're going to talk about some things. We're going to talk about a lot of things that's going to help unpack your ideas. Everything that I'm saying, you've heard before. Everything that I'm saying, you've heard before, but I'm going to try to unpack it in a way that opens up some perceptions in you. As a spiritualist, we cultivate a life of quietude and prayer. Why do you think we cultivate quietude and prayer?
To hear God.
There you go. To catch a thought from God. To catch a thought from the ancestors. That sounds nice and spooky, right?
Sounds confident.
The Creator never stopped talking to us. We just forgot how to listen. So now we use terms like spookism, and people use it as an insult. It just means communication with spirit. But they use it like a curse word. We should just say ancestor veneration. Right? So we're trying to train ourselves to catch a thought, but we have thought police in our community.
Sure.
Go to the pyramid text. Because people talk about a scientific method and they try to shut down spirituality. So let's read. Power is the exercise thanks to intuition, or thanks to intuitive knowledge and clear thought. Clear thought is a result of meditation. Victories are won with power by those who know the unknown and prepare for it. That sounds nice and spooky, don't it? So when we talk about intuition, intuition is your ability to know without a process. That spirituality, I hear people saying that there's no word for spirituality in ancient Kemet. It wouldn't be a word for it because they just lived it. That's a word that we use now because we're trying to get back to what we lost. They wasn't having to try to get back anything. It was just natural to them. So you won't find a word for spirituality in it. But this is a clue that it was something solid, it was something real, and it was something to be attained for. So look at what it says. Power is exercised thanks to intuitive knowledge. Can y'all say Sia?
Sia.
Can you say Saya?
Saya.
Saya is intuitive knowledge. What this says in Medoneta, it would say Dua to Sia. That means they divinized, they venerated, they deified intuition. Isn't that powerful? So they deified intuition, they deified a spiritual concept because it was that key in developing the culture. So our people, sometimes they try to police our thoughts. Be like, yo, where'd you get that thought? Sometimes the Creator's gonna release some stuff through you that nobody ever heard.
And in no books.
And it ain't in no books, so we have the thought police. Where'd you get that from? You made that up. Source up or shut up, they say. And I understand that that's respectful. I'm not a scholar, I'm a spiritualist. I can be scholastic when I want to, I can be scholastic when I need to. But I'm not carrying that title so nobody can hold that's the, oh, you didn't do such and such. I'm a spiritualist first. So as a spiritualist, this is my philosophy, to directly know. Well, we could say believe, but then verify, right? So they say source up or shut up. The thing about sources is this curious thing that happens with sources. Sources always eventually lead to some white folks. And then we get into debating each other over which is a more reputable white source than the next. Hey, I follow Alan Greenberg because he designated the languages. And don't follow this white lady, Helen Blavatsky, because she was too spiritual and spooky. And we're never consulting priests of the actual tradition. Yoruba is an unbroken spiritual tradition. Akan is an unbroken spiritual tradition. Why aren't we consulting with them and find out what the process was to learn what it is that they learned, right? So some people will look at people like us and be like, oh, don't follow them, they look crazy. Where they say we carry oversized aunts, short order cook hats. And then on our side, we'd be like, oh, don't follow them because they have poor character. And they say, oh, no, don't follow them, they dress crazy. Oh, look at them, they're foolish. And then y'all are going back like, oh, jump.
Right.
Who do I follow?
Right.
We do look kind of crazy with them clothes, but these cats over here, I can't have my children listen to.
Exactly.
So what do? I say rejoice, because this is the time you all been waiting for. You all came from Christianity, Islam, and Judaism and saying y'all wasn't gonna listen to nobody no more, right? Remember, all the answers is within me. Remember that? So now you talk about I don't know where to follow or who to follow. Attention is currency. Everybody's fighting for your attention. Attention is currency. Back in the day, in the 1980s, we had a song called "What People Do for Money." How many people remember that song? What people do for money. Now it ain't money no more, it's attention. So people do for attention.
That was the joint.
What will you do for the attention? Will you slander? Will you lie? So you go on your YouTube and you look at your views and be like, oh wow, all these people are listening to me. What can I do to keep this up? What will I do to keep this up? See, now morals is on the line. Y'all follow? Your attention has now become somebody's commodity. Now watch this. If it's somebody's commodity, then you all as the community has to take responsibility for nothing moving in the community because you're failing to commit. Remember, if it's about your attention and you're not committing to anything, y'all are the majority. So if you're not committing to anything, nothing gets done. Back in the 80s, Kwame Nkrumah says less than 98% of melanated folks in America are not part of any organization. Don't we need organization and nation, Bill? So 98% are not committed to any organization or anything dealing with organization, which means 98% of us is full of crap. That's scary. So we have to take full accountability. Accountability is supreme law in the Kemetic legacy. Accountability is supreme law. It's another word for Maat. If you don't like accountability, this is not the path for you. There's no Jesus to save you from your sins. There's no absolution from your sins. There's no eternal punishment. The only punishment is to have to look in a woman's eyes and she's disappointed in you. To look into your brother's eyes and your children's eyes and if they're disappointed in you. That's punishment enough. If that don't move you, then you might be dead inside. Some say religion is man-made. What do y'all think?
No.
Religion is man-made. Is that a problem? It shouldn't be, right? But people say religion is man-made because they haven't found God. Let's deal with it. He dealt with the spookism, right? Y'all need to see that? But we go to the book of knowing the creations of Ra as Ptah. It is Ptah, a form of Ra, the most great, who has given existence to all the divine powers and to their essences through his heart, mind, and tongue. Thus it came to pass that the heart, mind, and tongue ruled over all members through teaching that Ptah Ra is within everybody as heart and mind, within every mouth and tongue. All the divine powers of humankind, of cattle, of all creeping, it sounds like Genesis, right?
Yeah.
All creeping things and all living things, and he thinks as heart and mind and commands his tongue whatever he wishes. Ptah Ra's company of divine powers are before him as teeth, lips, and are the teeth and lips which establish the names of all things and from which came forth Shu, the powers of light and air, and Tefnut, the power of moisture, and brought into being the company of divine powers themselves. So, what you understand from this is, there's a passage before that. It said, when I came into existence, existence itself came into existence. That's powerful. Bars. He said, when I came into existence, existence itself came into existence. That means that existence is God. Existence is divine. Excuse me. I just whooped the coronavirus.
Don't joke like that. I'm not joking like that.
Existence is divine. So isn't man part of that existence? If that man wasn't stripped of his identity and taken from his land, wouldn't it be safe to say that that man or that human was connected to God or at one with God? Right? And as a result of that connection with nature, he devised ceremonies, rituals, and codes to survive and thrive in life and with life. Then who created religion then? If this man created these codes and ceremonies because he was in tune with nature to survive, thrive in life and with life, then who created religion? Say it again. God and man is one and the same.
Exactly.
You see, that's the resolution. If you're at one with nature, then you are God. You are the divine being. That makes sense? It says, some people say, man created God in his image. Who was that? Who? Nobody knows? Nah, this is the deity concept. That's Amen. Oh, he said it's on too. They're supposed to have crowns. Yeah, both of them supposed to have crowns. Who's that?
That's all.
Okay. What? Both of those pictures, what face is that? Is that an animal face or a human face?
Human.
It was supposed to be the Noon. Y'all ever heard of the Noon? The Noon is the primordial waters where all life came from. What they say in Genesis is the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. That's the Noon, the primordial waters. So it represents the infinite state of potentiality, representing how to come from potentiality into actuality. Potentiality would be Amen, actuality would be Ra. Okay? Well, who is that? Who? Sebek. What species is a crocodile?
Reptile.
Reptile, okay. Who is that? Ora. What species is that?
Reptile.
That name is Eon. In Swahili, it'll be Inyani. That's a form of Jehuti. That's a what? Baboon. And what species is that?
A mammal.
Who is that?
Kheper.
What species? Say that again?
Insect.
Who's that? What species?
A bird.
Who's that? Yeah, it represents the earth, plants, and minerals, right? So all this from the mind of man. So what is it communicating? It's communicating that God is one. God is everything, yet is no thing. Everything that we can perceive, and yet everything that we cannot perceive. We just almost mocked the whole theory of evolution. Right? You saw the reptiles, you saw the mammals, you saw humans, you saw animals. So God is the face of creation. God, what you call God, is the cosmos. The cosmos is a Greek word for world, but it also means divine order. So the reflection of the Creator is Ma'at, and that's the highest order of ethics in the universe. That makes sense? Some people ask about metal nectar. I think I heard somebody demanding Sanet to not let anybody back on this platform so they demonstrate meat and metal nectar. I'll say what's more important than metal nectar right now is medu nefer. Can y'all say that?
Nefer.
Y'all know what that means?
Good speech.
Good speech. We need good speech. We need good, effective speech. And this is a message to the men, because most of the men are in the community teaching. But most of the men in the community, a lot of the men in the community are very immature with the teaching. A lot of people are calling it toxic masculinity. I wouldn't call it that. I'll just say it's some immaturity around it. But men have to understand good speech if they want to take this position of leadership within the community. Good, effective communication means being circumspect before you open your mouth. Do you know who you're talking to? Do you know the temperament of who you're talking to? And then you make the necessary adjustments in live time. A lot of this is stemming from a lot of men haven't been raised with fathers. So we're using tantrum as our just everyday normal state of mind. So you have to be circumspect, and you have to be able to listen actively, not listen to respond what you're doing, what you're hearing, what you're seeing now is a lot of people listening just to respond. It's just, I got you. They're not even letting you finish saying what you're trying to say. They're not actively listening. Because most issues that come in our community come from miscommunication and the lack of listening. Poor communication and poor listening skills. So we have to be more reflective. We have to be more introspective. We have to be more circumspect before we open our mouths. Therefore, it gets back to that meditation. What if I said this is right here, if I said, sit down and shut up and know your place. I got this. Look at young guys like, too much bass in the world. Let's say logic represents the masculine and spirituality represents the feminine. Y'all would say that was disrespectful, but the same thing is going on with logic and spirituality. Spirituality is the feminine, spirituality is the woman, and you want to shut down spirituality, you want to laugh at it. Isn't that the same as disrespecting the woman?
You better believe it.
Women don't mind following men as long as the men factor in what's going on with the women as they make their decision, right?
Yes, right.
She'll be back. She'll have their back 100%. Yeah. Same thing with spirituality. Spirituality works in life if you take the ancestors and the spirit and what they have to say into your decision-making process, or else you're only going to know the half-truth at most at any given time. So I'm not even saying that you got to be all spiritual. There has to be some logic and spirituality too.
True.
We still have to stop at the stop signs and traffic lights too. But we'll be real spiritual. All right, let me get back to that concept. So we were dealing with the concept. We said God is all, everything and yet no thing. Everything yet no one thing. It is creation. A lot of people are having problems with this in the community, perceiving what's our concept of divinity. They get confused of those gods. No, that is Netter. It is the power. It is the principle. Okay? So, some people are looking for some book to explain what's the difference between figurative and literal meanings. Maybe like, well, is it real or is it not real? Did they really believe a man or some being was walking around with a goose on his head? So they're looking for some compendium where the ancestors say, no, they didn't believe this. This is what this is what that is. So I'll say the ancient Christians were actually smarter than a lot of people in the conscious community now. They got it. I'm going to show you something. All right, Origen, early Christian bishop of Alexandria, said the Egyptian philosophers have sublime notions with regards to the divine nature, which they keep secret and never disclose to people but under the veil of fables and allegory. So sometimes if you can't find it from the people, you got to get it from the people that were around the people and observe the people and interacted with the people. So they said that they taught through fables and allegories. What is a fable?
A story, it's made up.
Are fables real or are they not real?
They're not real.
They can contain elements of some real things, all right? Okay, watch this. Pope Leo X, the fable of Christ that served the church well. So it sounded like they was learning something from our ancestors on how to teach religion to their people. Watch this. Dionysius, the first Christian bishop of Paris. If anyone implies that it is disgraceful to fashion base images of the divine in most holy orders, it is sufficient to answer that most holy mysteries are set forth in two modes. Check this out. It says, if anyone implies that it is disgraceful to fashion base images, remember the Christians ain't supposed to be messing with images. Right. It sounds like he defending it, right? Two modes, one by means of similar and sacred representations akin to their nature, and the other to unlike forms designed with every possible discordance. Thus, divine things may not be easily accessible to the unworthy, nor may those who earnestly contemplate the divine symbols dwell upon the forms themselves as final truth. So no, don't be thinking somebody's walking around with a goose on their head and said that's not the final truth. It's two ways to understand it. So if you see what we had Heru up there with the falcon head, right? When you see that up there, that means a man who's walking with his head in the heavens and the feet on the ground. We're talking about characteristics within the man. Okay. So when you see the falcon by itself, that's a principle of nature. But you're not supposed to take it literal. And then they'll throw images like that. Who is this? Who are we looking at?
Newt and Gad.
Yeah. What's this one?
That's Newt.
This?
Gad.
Okay. And what does Newt represent? Sky. And what about Gad? Earth. And Shu in between?
Atmosphere.
That's clear enough, right? You remember what it just said about dissimilarity? When you got something like this and throw you off. See, they was getting it. So here Newt has phallus. And Gad has his phallus going in his mouth. This is the dissimilarity. This is when you're not supposed to take it literal. That means there's something else going on in there. Because even a Christian knew to look at that and knew that that wasn't talking about, this is stuff people were doing in real life. So this is talking about the earth turning and regenerating upon itself. It's talking about yin and yang, black, white with the black. You know, y'all know the yin and yang symbol. So male as well as female has both principles within them at the same time. Both are constantly trying to transform one another. That balance is what you got to create life. Every man is 80% masculine, 20% feminine. Every woman is 80% feminine, 20% masculine. You have that thing going on. All right. So now at the last State of the Communion address, I put the community on code. He's talking about we need a code. People are off code. They lost their moral fiber. They lost their moral balance. So I spoke about the elders. I can't believe in 2020 we're having this conversation about respecting elders. I don't care whether it was 1950 or 2020. We all supposed to know what respecting the elders look like. There's this counterintuitive thing that's going on in the community. We got men that want to act like boys and just throw tantrums as their regular way of communicating, and that don't fly. I don't care what generation you came from. When your mother speaks to you, shut your mouth.
That's right.
You ain't gotta like it. She could even be wrong, but that's what respect looks like. She could be wrong. You don't go on Facebook talking to you about your mother. You don't talk about your grandmother on Facebook. I don't care if it's now or in the space age. And yes, of course, us as elders and leaders and teachers, we have to still be the best example we could possibly be. So no one's off the hook from character, okay? So I needed to say that. So we understand in the African tradition, you got Neter, say that? Neteru. So Neter is the divine principle. The Neteru is the special manifestations of Neter that's responsible for man maintaining life as you know it. So name me a Neteru.
Mayat.
Heteru.
Santesh.
Name me one. Ra. What is Ra? We need sun to live, right? So that's a principle that sustains your life, right? So we need shu, we need air to live. That's a principle that sustains you. That's a netter group. Special manifestations of netter that's responsible for maintaining life as you know it. So there's a hierarchy that's going on. That's the glue to a community. And that we've got away from that. We've got into the information. And the information has got us off our square, off our circle, or off our point. I'm never going to discourage reading books, but it reminds me of the X-Clan, the song called Grand Verbalizer. It says, swimming in the books and the books ain't given. Scales of a black man, ways in the living. You're going to have to live it at one point. So the glue is the netter, appreciation of netter, the appreciation of the forces of nature. Then what's next on the hierarchy is ancestors. Pour libation for your father and mother who rest in the West. Netter will witness your actions and accept it. Do not forget to do this even when you're away from home. For as you do for your parents, your children will do for you also. How many people in here do libation? Every day. So he is telling you, even on vacation, he said, even when you're away from home, don't get away from it. This is the African feng shui to keep balancing your life. Selection from Ankh. Those who spit at the ancestors, their spit will fall back down on them. Honor those worthy of honor, and you cannot go wrong. So you can see ancestors as some energetic beings outside in your surrounding. And some people, how many people feel their ancestors around them? Let's get spooky up here. So they could be around you, but your ancestors are also in your blood. Your DNA. So when you do something that's against certain codes in your DNA, you're going to pay the consequences. When you eat foods that's against your genetic code, you're going to pay the consequences. So there's a scientific version and there's a spiritual version of the same thing. So don't disrespect your ancestors by putting stuff that's not supposed to be in your body, or else you're going to pay. Don't disrespect your ancestors by crapping on their legacy. The next is the elders. Remember, Neteru, ancestors, elders. Do not belittle the elderly in your heart. Honor the elder in your heart, and you will be honored in the hearts of all. At the end of the day, we all gonna be elders, and we ain't gonna want the young generations talking to us no certain way either, right? So you got to teach them that respect now, and not trying to fight for the respect later. Selection from Kheper. He, the netter, placed the heart deep in the body for right measure of its owner. Thus, if those who are learned do not balance, their learning is of little use. So we got all this knowledge going around in our community, but we have poor character. We have scholarship wars, but we need to be paying attention to our character flaws. Thus, if those who are learned do not balance, their learning is of little use. So we can't deify knowledge if we're not putting it in practice. Remember, knowledge, information is just data. Wisdom is putting it into practice. So wisdom could actually seem magical. You're like, yo, how'd you do that? You're like, I'll put it in practice. Pride and arrogance are the destruction of their owner, but those who are gentle in character create their own fate. Another selection. Gentleness and conduct of every kind causes the wise to be praised. Do not make your mouth harsh to speak loudly with your tongue, for a loud voice does damage to members of the body just like in illness. Now we have words of power.
Wow.
We have words that heal, and then there's words that hurt, harm. There's words that kill, so we didn't get that from the Hindu. Now you see why we do Hesi, now you see why we do chants, songs, dances, things. These things are like a libation of sound. They modulate your frequency. The body emanates frequency. And so our ancestors knew that certain things you could say could actually hurt you. Even what we learned through our Asian cousins is they found out that the organs are used to process your emotions. And if your emotions is caught in the wrong organs, that's the beginning of disease. The Chinese scientists figured it out already. I don't know about if they found out about that over here in the West. I think I see a certain healing institutions, they have people chanting sounds like ah, oh. So they're figuring it out. We're just doing it in our language, but it's still tonal. Do not be so impatient when you ask that you get angry when you're listening. Remember we talk about active listening, not listening just to respond, but active listening. Some people get so agitated by you just talking that they're jumping in, trying to stop you from building on your wisdom. The praise of the wise is great before the people because they listen. Do not yield often to your tongue in order to advise when you have not been asked. That's what's going on social media. Everybody's giving their two cents on everything, and nobody asked. And now, no one knows what to believe because everybody got a right to have an opinion. Got keyboard assassins and all of that. Those who hurry with their mouth give incorrect answers when they speak. One does not take seriously the words of the talkative when considering the accusation. One does not judge the complaint of a fool based on how loudly it's presented. And that's what's going on in our community. Everybody talk the loudest and stuff. It don't mean you right. So these are codes. Just understand, like, we can't talk nation building if we don't talk relationship building. Everything is about relationships and interrelationships. So what we're doing, what we're showing in our behavior is that we don't honor what's sacred to the other. So if you don't honor what's sacred to me, I ain't trying to make money with you.
Facts.
The people are like, let's just build, let's buy land. And be like, oh, but you just disrespected my ancestors. I can't rock. You got no code. You just disrespected my concept of deity. I can't deal with you. You just making your stuff up as it goes along. When you see me, when you speak to me, you know what I stand for. And then you can hold me to this, but what can I hold you to? You might think it's cool to come in my house and steal my woman where you come from. Keep your distance from those with hate in their hearts. Don't y'all get that as spiritual people. Oh, you think you too good to be hanging with you? Like, actually, yeah. So when you know who you are, you don't seek validation for people that don't know their path. There's a difference between being lonely and alone. Instructions of Mary Colorado. Do not join the crowd. Hold up. I heard it said that they don't be seeing us Kemites out in the struggle. In the liberation of our people, they feel like we just be staying up in the house not doing nothing. But look at this. This is why we don't be out there. Do not join the crowd that you meet when it has gathered to fight without a plan. Preparation or purpose. Keep away from the rebels without a cause. When wars are fought, they should be just wars. When plans are made, they should be well made. When people are selected, they should be good people. When rewards are given, they should have been earned. So let's go to the top. Do not join the crowd that you meet when it has gathered to fight without a plan. So okay, so we're going to be doing this revolution thing. Without a plan, there is no war. That's called slaughter. Say if we wanted to get it cracking right now, we all go out and get killed. Nobody got no guns or nothing. Just bodies just running out and slaughtered. And that's what people are asking us to do. Just be out there. Be like, okay, well, who got the bail money? Because people gonna go to jail.
That's right.
Well, where's the lawyer? What you talking about? What's the lawyer? You ain't even got a more scientist nowhere. We're gonna need people that know the law. We're gonna need people with resources. We're going to need police. We're going to need military folk. You know what I'm saying? So if you don't got certain things in play, it ain't even worth the effort until people are really ready to talk some real stuff. Until then, it's just a gesture. All right, I'm going to close it up in a few. We often get confused with accused of imitating Christians. So we have to look at this word syncretism. It's an amalgamation or attempted amalgamation of different religions, cultures, or schools of thought. Now, all of us in the room, we are a syncretism of everything since we left Africa. Certain experiences is never going to leave us. We can never be that other thing that we were. Again, we got different genetics mixed up in it. That's why people talk about they're not African, because we got several different strands of genetics. We're something totally new that the planet ain't seen before. But we still got the same root from Africa.
That's right.
And we still carry that genetic information. So we're just syncretic, not synthetic. We're syncretic by nature. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. All right, let's look at the comparison. Kemet, Ankh, Ephah, Bible. So we got into that at the beginning. Neter is the creator. Neteru is the creative forces. Hemametu is the ancestors. And the ones that work all of the stuff in between is the clergy. That's Kemet. Go to Ankh. Inyon Kumpon is creator. Obasum, the deity. In Sankhu, and in Samanfo is the ancestor, and they have priests. Ephah, Olodomari, creator. Orisha, selected heads. The Gungun, ancestors, clergy. Bible, you got God. You got angels, that's the selected heads. Ancient prophets, don't the Christians and the Jews and the Israelites use the Bible like how the Ephah uses the oracle? Same thing. You reading some ancient history and you pick a passage and be like, this is the passage for today, and you live your life, you're like, yo, it came true. Same thing with Ephah, they throw the patterns. It's talking stories that got nothing to do with what's going on right now, but it has patterns of information that has something to do with right now. And it's talking about patterns of behavior. The Bible is telling you about patterns of behavior. Ephah is telling you about patterns of behavior. Each one has an oracle system clergy. So when y'all think we're imitating Christianity, Christianity is just the newest thing on the scene that was already imitating Ephah, Ankh, Kemet. Okay? That right here is a bowl from the Congo. What do we see on there?
You see the Jews?
Like
Star of David.
Jews as hell, right? They got the Jewish star, they got the Wiccan star, they got the cross. That's an example of syncretism. But how they use it got nothing to do with Christianity. Just like I said, we use the word communion, but it has nothing to do with the blood, body and blood of Jesus. It means the union of Kemites. We get clever like that. That's expression of syncretism. But it has nothing to do with other people's concepts. I mean, this is a libation alabaster. In the Congo, it was believed like when you see a shooting star across the sky, that was said to be a spirit of an ancestor. So those 5-pointed stars are representing the backdrop of the cosmos, because this thing belonged to a very powerful ancestor, and it's there. It said like you cannot drink from it or use it if you was just as strong, if you wasn't just as strong as or stronger than the owner of this. So the 6-pointed star means a heavenly influence that affects the earth, and that's a Christian cross, right? It's not. But that looks like the Christian cross, right? They already had the cross in the Congo. They already had the cross in Voodoo. It's the X, the cross that represents the leg bar. In the Congo, the cross represents the cosmonogram. It means the 4 points of the universe, the 4 moments of Ra. You see, it's all syncretism. So we could use the same symbols and have a whole total different meaning, but it still all be essentially the same. All right, so I'm going to close it up. All right. I'm going to close it up by saying classical Africa, like why we say that we're Kemetic. We know we come from West Africa. We know we're not native Egyptian. Y'all know that, right? Did we even have to say that? Why people are forcing this conversation like we have to say that? Do y'all understand what Reconstruction is? It means to take something that was inspired by the old and reconstruct it in a way where it's useful, right? You remember the ceremony the sister did up front? Was that ancient, or do y'all know that was reconstructed? Maybe they did. Maybe it was actually quiet. It was reconstructed. So our elders told us that Kemet was the best that Africa had to offer. Kemet was the mouthpiece of Africa. Arguably, I guess, because some people want to argue different. It doesn't mean that we can only acknowledge Kemet and that we can't acknowledge where we come from. We come from West Africa, but we don't have to be limited to it. There's a such thing as you know where your heritage comes from, but your philosophy could be totally different. Say, what would you do if you found out that, you no disrespect to any tribes or anything, what if you came from the tribe that had the plates in their lips? What would you do?
Celebrate.
Celebrate? So would you walk with a plate in your lip? Not, like I said, no disrespect to that. Like, there's a lot on the continent of Africa, some high, some low, some medium. You have the right to choose the best. If you're going to choose, right? If you're going to choose, then choose up. Okay. Y'all understand? Am I making sense? Yeah. Choose the best. So I liken it to the metaphor of Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali is arguably the best fighter ever, right? Okay, let's go with that. So he was arguably the best fighter. Say now I want to be the champion, the heavyweight champion. I got to study Ali, right? I got to find out how many miles he ran, how much time he spent on the speed bag, how much time he spent on the heavy bag. What did he eat? What was his personal philosophy like, right? That's how you're going to get down to the essence of tapping your greatness, right? And when you do that, I might find out I could run faster than Ali. I can't hit the speed bag as much. So you're going to self-style your stuff along the way. And along the way, they might even start calling you Little Ali. They be like, oh, he reminds me of him. You don't have to be no relationship to Ali. So you embrace it. The people embrace it. And then maybe one day you could be the heavyweight champion of the world. And even if you don't become the heavyweight champion of the world, you'll still be a better version of yourself if you never try. Then if you never try, y'all get it? So one way or another, you're going to have to train. You're going to have to do what champions do. You can't just think it. You can't just read about it. When it's time for self-defense, do you want to learn self-defense from the martial scholar or the martial artist?
Martial artist.
You want the person to do it. So now we understand the Greeks was influenced by Kemet. The Romans were influenced by the Greeks. America took Greek, Rome, all of it. And some things they did better than Kemet and some things not. That's our story. So we going back to we have a more direct connection to that source than they did. Some things we're going to self-style, some things we're going to do better, some things we might not do better. So the question is, are we really Kemetic people? We come from the same root that spawned the Kemetic people. The mitochondrial DNA, when it left Africa and went into Eurasia, because there's no Europe, there's only Eurasia. Europe is just Western Asia. It mutated into the M, N, and R haplogroups. Then it mutated into C, T, and CE. Like I'm just freestyling off the top of the head. D and E separated somewhere in Asia, and then E came back into Africa and Black Arabia, back into Central Africa.
Asia, like the Middle East is Southwestern Asia, Southwest Asia, like Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Oman, and United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Syria.
Okay, thank you, brother. Okay. So it came back to South, Central, and West Africa as the E haplogroup. Then it turned into E1B1A and E1B1. Now from that E, the E1B1A and E1B1 is where you get West Africa and East Africa. So we come from that same root that went on to eventually become the ancient Egyptian, and that other root went on to become what we know as the West African. So we have a common root. So we have a connection to both East Africa and West Africa. We have a connection even to Asia if you want to keep chasing it back. trace the E back to the D, E back to the M and R, back to the L1, L2. That's starting to sound like the netter. Remember, the netter is everything you perceive and everything. When we showed all the different variations, why we keep trying to limit, it's like saying, Ra, you ain't Ra because you're supposed to be Kheper. Ra is Kheper. So whether I say E or E1B1A or E1B1, it's all still the same bloodline. You get it? That's Kushite, that's self-determination. So we're going to show you just an example of what syncretization of our experience since the beginning of time till now. This is an old commercial for one of our retreats, so you can see what the legacy looks in live time. For those of you who never seen it, who are just still reading in the books, this is an example. Go ahead. Thanks.
Celebrate the Kemetic New Year with a traditional African ceremony. Wetwar Ket is the opening of the year in the Kemetic tradition, marked by the rising of the star Sirius to express gratitude for the ceaseless flow of abundance. The Wetwar Ket celebration retreat is an opportunity to recharge by spending 4 days and 3 nights on 130 acres of mountainous and wooded terrain during a weekend of spiritual cultivation. Honor and feel the power of our ancestors and the Netru by connecting with them on a deeper level. Invoke the divine forces of Asar, Haligor, Satesh, Aset, and Nebuhet. Engage in authentic Afro-Kemetic expressions of yoga, meditation, drumming, dancing, and chanting. Cultivate Maat, balance and harmony, as you cleanse your body through an ionic exchange with a clean moving stream. Dine on all natural organic foods grown on site and experience the coming together of conscious African people for personal and collective empowerment. Thursday, July 28th to Sunday, July 31st, 2016. Register today to be a part of this life-changing celebration.
Give credit to that man right there with the camera. He did that for me. This is another expression. This is the last one. What you're witnessing today is a harmonious blend of Western tradition with Eastern tradition. Not so far east as China, but east as in Africa. Ancient Egypt, to be exact, Ghana, and also elements of Nigeria. Because all participants today in this ceremony are descendants of Africa by way of the Caribbean. Marriage is not just the coming together of two individuals. You see, marriage is the coming together of two families, two tribes, two nations. It's the coming together of worlds. That was our hostess tonight. See, so now you see what we're doing should be celebrated, not hated upon. So what you saw is us inviting you into just a part of what it is that we do. We don't just sit around and pray and stuff all day. Like, we pray, then we got to get to work. We're not monks. Like, we're not in the monastery. It's very functional. So that's just part of some of the rituals that we do to empower ourselves. But we don't just do that. We come and we build family. We build spiritual families, concentric circles. We build code. We talk code. We talk about building resources, and we talk about what it is that we need to do to actually defend what it is that we have. Because if you can't defend it, it's like not having it at all. Yeah. And then we also talk about discussing what are going to be the codes on how we negotiate with one another, and what are going to be the codes on how we negotiate with other nations. Because that's what it's going to come down to. It was never about the information. It was about the resources. respect comes from resources. When you hear about wars, nobody's warring over information. They're warring over your gas, your spices, toilet paper, or whatever it is that you need. That's what it's always going to be about. So we have to discuss what are our resources, what are resources other nations have, and we're going to have to start. But we got to have some basic respect.
That's right.
We don't always got to be talking about our religion and our God concepts. What about us as human beings?
Right.
So that is what being Kemetic is about. It's about family. It's about tribe. It's about how to protect. It's about your resources. Any other talk outside of that is just background noise. That's the talk I'm about, and I think that's the talk y'all all about, and that's the main reason why I'm the guardian of the Ankh. Thank you.
Mr. Tony Browder. I always want to call you doctor. You know that in my head, you're Dr. Tony Browder. I just feel like you are a doctor. You're such an amazing scholar, right? So I want to tell a personal story. This is a dream come true for me. And I feel like it's so important to live your truth because you manifest the very things that are within you when you live your truth. So I'm going to share my story of coming into contact with your work. So I did my dissertation, my doctoral work in Oakland, California, and I created an African-centered program for middle schoolers. And at the time, thank you, and at the time I was an assistant principal at Edinburgh Middle School in Oakland. And I had my social studies teachers, I was in charge of like 6th grade, 7th grade, and I would help lead some curriculum. And I had one of the teachers one day, they were teaching about ancient Egypt. And as I walked into the classroom, they were saying how the ancient Egyptians practiced polytheism. And I was like, I was all in it, like I was about to stop the lesson in the middle. And I was like, all right, let me just calm down. Because truly, when teachers teach about ancient Kemet, it is so very distorted and from a Eurocentric framework, and it's oftentimes just incorrect. So after the lesson, I pulled the teacher to the side and I said, okay, let's talk. You can never teach that lesson like that again. If I need to buy all of y'all this book, now the contribution to civilization, I will buy it out of my own pocket. But here, let me explain to you about the ancient Kemetic civilization and the fact that no, we did not practice polytheism. When you don't understand that for Africans, and the Sid already gave this lecture, we see God in there are multiple manifestations of God, right? So we see God as the sun, God as the air. And so oftentimes Europeans do not understand this concept. So they think we worship in everything, right? When for us, it is that we see God as multifaceted. God is everything and yet is no thing. And so even before I was in contact with the Temple of Anu, before I ever got in contact with Mr. Tony Browder, I was telling people like, listen, you better get this. When my students would talk about Christmas, I'm like, okay, let me get you some text, right? So it's important to have text. So for me tonight, it is such an honor and a privilege and a dream come true. And I love that they sang about being stronger and that change gonna come, because truly it is within us. Like tonight is about you remembering your personal power. It is about you coming in contact with your inner divine self and knowing that you are the change, right? Like we cannot wait for anyone. We see that we are living in some tumultuous times. We can't wait for anybody. So without further ado, let me just tell you a little bit about our guest, Mr. Anthony Browder. Anthony Browder is an author, publisher, cultural historian, artist, and an educational consultant. He's a graduate of Howard University, you know, must be so you know. That's right. And has lectured extensively throughout the United States and 5 continents. Mr. Browder is the founder and director of IKG Cultural Resources and has devoted 38 years researching ancient Kemetic history, science, philosophy, and culture. He has traveled to Egypt 58 times since 1980 and is currently director of ASA Restoration Project, which is funding the excavation and restoration of 2 25th dynasty tombs of Kushite noblemen on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt. Mr. Browder is the first African American to fund and coordinate an archaeological dig in Egypt and has led 25 archaeological missions to Egypt since 2009. He has authored or co-authored 14 publications, which are currently used in classrooms around the world, and is dedicated to the positive portrayal of the worldwide African experience. Mr. Browder's 3 decades of study have led him to the conclusion that ancient Africans were the architect of civilization and developed the rudiments of what has become the scientific, religious, and philosophical backbone of mankind. It is from this framework that IKG has concentrated its research and disseminated its findings. Without further ado, Mr. Anthony Browder.
Stirring introduction. I'm pleased to be here, pleased to be in the presence of old faces and new faces, and hopefully we'll make some new friends before the night is over. I think we're good. Yeah, we're good. We're good. So, I'm pleased to be here on so many different levels. 7 hours ago, I funeralized my son. And, the older I get, and the more people I know and love who pass away, the more I begin to understand what life is all about. And after having spent 12 years excavating and restoring this tomb, or 3 tombs in Egypt, I now understand very clearly that there is no death. There's only life after life. And, when we look at the world in which we live, 99.9% of the people on this planet are not going to get it. And that's all right. I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm here living my truth, sharing what I know, and if you choose to embrace it, fine. If you choose not to embrace it, fine. Everybody's walking their own path. And I'm here today. One of the reasons why I wanted to come and didn't cancel was because I love doing what I do. And I love sharing my information, my experiences with others. And I ask you all to receive what I have to bring to you today in the spirit in which it's delivered. So let me just jump into it. This is a new presentation, the second time that I'm doing it. And it is the culmination of 40 years of traveling to Egypt, 40 years of studying and synthesizing everything that I've learned and understanding what it all means, understanding how relevant it is in my life. So the title of this presentation is From the Nile to the Niger to the Potomac. And I'm going to be focusing on the historical journey of African people, not based on what I think, not based on what I believe, but based on what I know. We live in a knowledge-based society. Knowledge is everything. And so I talk about what I know. And as Ivan Van Sertima taught me years ago, never talk about anything in public that you can't back up with at least 4 sources. So I'm bringing you what I know. And I present these facts to you So that if it resonates with you, then fine. If it doesn't, fine. But this is my truth as I know it. This presentation is dedicated to 4 brothers who have been the cornerstone of my development. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who I met in 1977. He was just February 21st, 1977. He was just published and came from the University after 77. I went to see him at Georgetown Law School. I was impressed by his scholarship. I was impressed by his intellect. And he freed my mind when he told me that the Egyptians had built ships, navigated the Nile River, the Mediterranean Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and had traveled to the Americas between 1200 and 600 BC. They had been here 2,500 years before Christopher Columbus was born. And then he provided the evidence to back up that statement. And then when he said that the ancient Egyptians were black, it blew my mind. Because everything that I had been taught in every school system prior to 1977 reinforced the lie that the ancient Africans were non-black. So it freed my mind. And I had the pleasure of traveling to Mexico with Van Sertima on 2 occasions, visiting the Olmec sites, visiting temples and monuments, and reinforcing this profound truth that he poured into me. The other person I want to dedicate my talk to this evening is Dr. Ben. My first trip to Egypt with Dr. Ben in December of 1980. And that 13-day study tour on the Nile changed my life forever. I saw with my own eyes information that had been denied me throughout elementary school, high school, and college. Even though I went to predominantly black schools, what I came to realize is that you can only teach what you know. And if you don't know the truth, you're going to perpetuate somebody else's lies. The other person I dedicate my talk to fortunate to be able to cultivate a friendship with Dr. Clark. Dr. Clark wrote the introduction to my second book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. And the relationship was such that whenever I had a question, whenever I had a problem, I could pick up the phone and call Dr. Clark, and he would work me through whatever issue I was working with. And then the fourth person is H.G. What I do is model on these 2 brothers, because like many brothers, I never knew my father, never met my biological father. So as a young black man growing up, I was searching to find my place in the world. And one of the things that I was good at doing was identify people who had talents and skills that resonated with me, and I kind of latched on to them and grafted aspects of their personality onto my personality. And Dr. Clark and Asa were 2 men who really showed me how to do what I've been doing for well over 30 years. And I acknowledge them as the cornerstone of my cultural consciousness. They made me who I am. And so what I share with you this evening, what I would do throughout all of my life, is a result of my relationship with these people. And so I want to talk about some fundamental truths. We're living in a time of change. We're living in a time of fundamental transformation, and we need to prepare ourselves for change. And so the information that I want to share with you, these 4 fundamental truths, sometimes when you present new information, people naturally are resistant to new information. I understand psychology, and people have a tendency to reject things that move them outside of their psychic center. So rejection of new information is natural, and sometimes, particularly when you're dealing with our people, when you present new information, you have to bring new information to them from European sources, because they have a tendency to think that it's more credible. So I want to share with you all 4 basic truths that come from the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. There's a relatively new exhibit. It's about 15, 16 years old now. And when students come to DC, I take them to this museum before I take them to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, because I want them to understand certain information that is not being taught in schools to this very day. So in this exhibit, in the David Koch Hall of Human Origins, they state that, they state that 200,000 years ago, Africans were the only human beings on Earth. This information is 15 years old, as I said, so new data has come out, and I've updated the data in this presentation. So we know for a fact, scientifically proven fact, that 300,000 years ago, Africans were the only human beings on the planet. And in this exhibit, they say that 60,000 years ago, Africans populated East Asia. They go on to say that 40,000 years ago, Africans populated West Asia, or the landmass that we now call today Europe. So if you look at this map, it shows you what was once called the out of Africa theory, which is now an accepted fact. Africa is the birthplace of humanity, and Africans moved out of Africa into East Asia, and over the course of tens of thousands of years, walked across the continent, walked across the Bering Strait into North America, Central America, South America, populated every island in the Caribbean. This is a scientifically accepted fact today. So, if you understand what this means, the very first people in Asia were whom? Africans. The very first people in Europe were whom? Africans. This is a new fundamental truth that we need to begin to embrace, fundamental truth that we need to introduce to our children so that they can begin to understand clearly who they are and what they have inherited. And another fundamental truth is 6,000 years ago, civilization began in the Nile Valley. At least 6,000 years ago. At least 6,000 years ago. So, if you look at a map of the Nile Valley, the Nile River is 4,160 miles long. The Nile River flows from the south down north, which is the reason why the south is called Upper Egypt or Upper Kush, and the north is called Lower Egypt and Lower Kush, because the river follows the natural terrain of the earth. And so the White Nile begins in Uganda, the Blue Nile comes out of Lake Tana in Ethiopia, and thanks to my friend Chester Higgins, who lives in Brooklyn, he created this map last year that shows you the terrain from Lake Tana and how the terrain decreases as it moves further north. And so Lake Tana is the source of the Blue Nile, and the Blue Nile meets in Khartoum with the White Nile, and these two rivers merge together. The White Nile comes out of Uganda, and by the time it reaches Khartoum, 90% of the water has evaporated. 90% of the water has evaporated. So that all of the water from Khartoum on that forms the Nile River, 90% of that water comes out of Ethiopia. And with that water from Ethiopia comes the rich silt from the volcanic soil, which makes the Nile River Valley the most fertile land on earth. And then that water and that silt flows down the Nile and empties out into and created the Mediterranean Sea. This is Geography 101. So then when you look at the Nile River, as Dr. Clark often refers to the Nile River as the world's oldest cultural highway. People travel from inner Africa to outer Africa using the Nile River as a cultural highway. And so as a consequence of this northerly migration, these Africans oriented themselves to the south. The south was up, north was down. The world as we know it, brothers and sisters, have literally been turned upside down. Why? Because the maps that we've been using since the 15th century, the Mercator maps, were created by Europeans. And whoever creates the maps orients you to their specific orientation. So it's about understanding how the world in which we live came to be, and then determining where you fit into this world and what you're going to do with that knowledge. Do you feel me? Yes. So then, one of the other things that we have to also understand is that there were also cultural highways that connected East Africa to West Africa. Here's a relatively recent map that shows, using satellite imagery, river basins and lakes all throughout Africa. So this whole area, thousands of years before it became a desert, was teeming with water systems. So if Africans could migrate from up south, down north, and then walk across Africa into Asia, North America, and South America, they could also move from the east to the west. These were migratory people. And we have to be clear about that. And they traveled these distances over thousands and thousands of years, bringing their cargo of knowledge with them from one location to another, jump-starting civilization as they move. This is our legacy. And so I'm celebrating 40 years of travel to Kemet. And just to give you some context, I've been studying this information for 43 years. I've had the pleasure, one of the reasons why I'm able to do what I've done is because I've been self-employed for 40 years. In order to do the things that I want to do. So I purchased my freedom a long time ago. And as a result of purchasing my freedom, I've been able to invest my time, my talent, and my treasure to those things that matter the most to me. And I believe in, no, I don't believe because belief is something you accept without proof. I know that it's important to share this information with every black life that matters to you. Yes. So that we can lift up our brothers and sisters and they can begin to do more with new knowledge. That's what this process is all about. So I've made over 70 trips to Africa. I've done 58 trips to Egypt, and if all goes well, I'm going to do 60 this year. Authored 13, 14 books, or co-authored 13, 14 books. And I've been excavating tombs in Egypt for 12 years. Right. And so what's important, what I really want you all to understand is that I've done these things without asking for people's permission. I've done these things because these were things that I wanted to do. And so I used my resources, I used my time in order to create the opportunity to make these things happen. And what I want you all to take away from my talk this evening, if nothing else, what I want you all to take away from my talk this evening is that I'm not unusual. I am no different than anybody else in this room. I just happen to have learned early in my life how life works. And I've made choices on how I'm going to live my life such that I can do the things that matter to me. I've never bought a new car. I had no interest in buying a new car because it depreciates as soon as you drive it off the lot. So I use my money in ways that allows me to do the things that matter most to me. So one of the most fascinating trips that I made in Africa was 4 years ago with Brother Renoka Rashidi. Sister Renoka and I are going to be in Oakland next Saturday doing a presentation. And I love that brother. He's one of the hardest working brothers out here. And we really need to honor the scholarship and all the hard work that this brother has dedicated his life to doing. And in 2016, I had an opportunity to travel to Kush with him. And this was a profoundly liberating and transformative trip on multiple levels, in that by that time I had been excavating 25th Dynasty tombs for 8 years. So to be able to travel to Kush with Renoko and to be able to see with greater clarity the things that we have been excavating, to be able to understand the architecture and the symbolism and all of these things just brought this area to life. And we had the occasion to camp out overnight at the Pyramid Fields in Merowe. An incredible evening. And as you all can see here from this pyramid field, they've been destroyed by Europeans who came searching for gold. They destroyed all of these pyramids. And what's important to note is that there are more pyramids in Kush than there are in Egypt. There's approximately 110 pyramids in Egypt, Kemet. There's over 500 in Kush. And so it's about, and it's also important to understand that pyramids are not tombs. No body was ever buried in any pyramid. So anytime anybody tells you that the pyramid is a tomb, they do not know what they're talking about. Right? One of the things that I learned on this trip in my early work from the Browder file, I made reference to the pyramid on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States was a Kemetic pyramid. But what I realized when I went to Kush, that it's really a Kushite pyramid. The angle of the structure is steeper, which means that when George Washington and America's other founding fathers created this symbol that was to represent the heart and soul of this new nation, they knew something about Africans in Kush and Kemet. And they used that knowledge to their advantage while telling us that we had no history or culture. So it ain't about getting mad at them. It's a matter of restoring that which was taken away from you and doing what it is that you're supposed to do. So the work that has consumed my life for the past 12 years is the Asa Restoration Project, named in honor of my dear friend, Brother Asa G. Hilliard III, who passed in Egypt on August 13, 2007. And Asa was a dear friend, and when I learned of his passing, I cried like a baby. It was like I lost my father. And if you know anything about African culture, that one of the ways that you honor an ancestor is by naming something after them. Yeah. And so when you speak their name, they continue to live. And so I had the occasion in July of 2008 to meet a woman, Alina Pishakova, who started excavating these two tombs on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt. And she had run out of money. And an Egyptian friend of mine introduced me to her. We did a tour of the tomb. And when I heard her story about her running out of money, I could hear Asa in one ear saying, Tony, you need to move on this. I could hear Dr. Clark in the other ear say, don't worry about how you're going to do it. We're going to make sure it gets done. I'm not a fundraiser, but I knew that this was something that I had to see to fruition. So in September of 2008, I created the Asa Restoration Project. I developed the concept. We're now a nonprofit, a 501c3. I traveled to Atlanta and met with Asa's wife and his son, Hakeem. I shared my idea with them. I received their blessing. And so the Asa Restoration Project was born on September 21st, 2008. I want to share with you a brief video clip that shows you where we are right now. Last year was our most successful year. We completed the restoration of the major tomb of this brother here, this priest, Karakamen, and we celebrated the restoration of this tomb by opening up a new exhibition in the Luxor Museum with 104 artifacts that we've uncovered over the past 12 years or so. And then we had a major festivity dinner on the grounds of Luxor Temple, right? And all of the bigwigs were there. All of the people there in Egypt acknowledged and thanked us for the work that we're doing, and they declared that no one in Egypt, particularly no one in the West Bank, has excavated or restored a tomb as we have. And so this is the first time in history that I've seen black folk on this level. And I represent you. As I said, we are a nonprofit. And so it is those people who have supported the work of the Asa Restoration Project and contributed to our work that has allowed us to do the things that we've done. So I want to share this brief clip, and hopefully it will play. initiative of our incredible mission members who have done the impossible. When these tombs were visited over 100 years ago, they were said to be almost totally and completely restored. We have brought them back to life. We have restored the names of Kemetic, restored the names of Kemet, and by the time we're finished with our work in South Africa, it's my hope, my desire, that this location will be known as the Valley of the Kushite Nobles. So, we are on track to finish the restoration of these three tombs and to open them to the general public in September of 2023. So I want you all to put your money aside now and make sure that you're in Egypt, because things will happen in Luxor, Egypt in 2023 that has never happened before. We'll be giving you more details of our plans, but put that date in your head. So this is the area where we've been excavating. This is an area known as South Assisi. This mountain range is known as the Assisi Mountains, A-S-A-S-I-S, Assisi. And the temple tombs of Kemetic and Kemetic are right here. We're right across the road from the Ramesseum. We're right down a couple of miles away from the Temple of Hatshepsut. We're right near the Valley of the Kings, right near the Valley of the Queens. We are in an area that we are going to rename in 2023 the Valley of the Kushite Nobles. Our site is the first Kushite tombs ever built in Egypt. The tomb of Kemetic and Kemetic were the first two Kushite tombs, and over the course of the past decade, as we have been excavating, what we found is at least 25 additional tombs. Wow. So this was a location where these two noblemen built their temple tombs, and then others who were part of their family and the cadre were buried in that same region as well. So where I thought a dozen years ago that I would just be in it and leave, I could literally be excavating in this place for the next 25, 30 years and still be scratching the surface. So my job is to inspire and train my replacements. We need people with skills. We need people with determination who will be able to continue this work long after I'm gone, so that we will have a place in Egypt that we have documented was a part of our history and culture, because we invested our time, our talent, and our resources to make sure that it's done. Here's an aerial view. This photograph was taken from a balloon in 2013. This is the main tomb that we've been excavating, the temple tomb of Kemetic, and here is the sun court of the tomb of Kemetic. This is the sun court, and this tomb is still underground. Kemec's tomb collapsed in the 1990s. And so the entire area was swallowed up into the earth. I'll talk more about that a little bit later on. Kemec's tomb was the first Kushite tomb built in Kemet. Kemetic was the mayor of Wasset. He was an architect. He was a priest. He was the person responsible for restoring Luxor Temple and Karnak Temple and the Avenue of the Sphinxes, which is an avenue that spans 1.7 miles and has 1,350 sphinxes. So it was the site of one of the most significant ceremonies that was conducted in Kemet every single year. And this brother, Kemetic, was the person responsible for restoring all of this so that he could bring order back into Kemet during the period of time in which John Henry Clark refers to as Africa's last great walk in the sun. Here's a photograph taken in 2006 of Kemetic's first pillared hall. And here's a photograph that was taken last year. So in the process of excavating, we found rooms that we never knew existed. And in those rooms, we make incredible discoveries. It's hard work, but it pays off in ways that you can never imagine. Matter of fact, in 2016, we found his burial chamber. And inside of this burial chamber, we found his sarcophagus. right? This sarcophagus, which according to my cousin Dietrich, who's sitting back in the back, he is our engineer of residence. He comes in and applies his engineering skills to help us figure out what we're doing and how we can do it better. That this sarcophagus weighs 20,000 pounds, 10 tons. It is made of rose granite. Rose granite comes out of Aswan, which is over 100 miles to the south. Now, I can't tell you how they quarried that stone. I can't tell you how they carved that stone. I can't tell you how they transported that stone, but I can show you where it is. And rose granite was only used by members of the royal family. So while there's not a lot of information that we've been able to uncover about this man, based on what we have found, we can assume that he was a member of the royal family. He may have been a relative of Shabaka. We feel that this time frame that we're excavating was during the reign of Shabaka. And so this sarcophagus measures 8 feet high, 5 feet wide, and 12 feet long. And again, it weighs 20,000 pounds. Here is Karnak Temple, Ayapet, the largest temple complex in the world. And this is the site where Rakaman, my brother, worked. He was an high priest. This is the temple that honors the spirit of Amen, the unseen presence of the Creator. And his job as the high priest was to lead the morning procession and evoke the words that would call down the unseen presence of God into his Holy of Holies, so that the spirit of the unseen presence of God would literally inspire the 83,000 men and women who worked in this temple complex. This is real. And we know that this brother had a major role to play in the restoration of this temple, in the recreation of the rituals that brought the Spirit of God back into his home. This is real. We also know that he had another brother whose tomb we found inside of his tomb, Nesamenepet, who also was a priest and worked there. And then his baby brother was a chief priest at Karnak Temple. His name was Haramanket. So we can identify at least 3 princely priests who worked in this temple complex, who were a part of the 25th dynasty. And here again is the aerial shot that shows you the excavations that we made over the course of the past 12 years. Between 2006 2010, we excavated in the first Pillared Hall. 2010 2011, we excavated in the second Pillared Hall. 2011 2012, we excavated in the open air sun court. And then in 2013, we were able to dig out the actual steps. So for the first time in well over 1,000 years, we were now able to enter the tomb through the original entrance. So this is the Ancient Restoration Project. All of this was destroyed, right? So we excavated, according to Dietrich's calculations, 2,700 tons of debris. And in that process, we found over 30,000 fragments. Every square inch of his temple tomb was covered with metanetry, was covered with paintings and carvings, every square inch. We have, in the first Pillared Hall, text from the Book of the Hours. We have, in the second Pillared Hall, at least 72 chapters from the Book of Coming Forth by Day. 13 of those chapters have been repeated. We also have pyramid texts. Pyramid texts, which were written 2,000 years earlier, are inscribed on the walls of his tomb. So what we're talking about is an act of Sankhu, engaged in by these 25th dynasty priests who went back and fetched the best of their ancestral heritage and then reinserted it in the present moment. And I feel very strongly that they left all of that for us to find at the time when we needed it. So 2,700 tons is 5,400,000 pounds, which is the weight of 36,000 people. Is that right, Peter? 36,000 people, or 2 basketball stadiums. The weight of people in 2 basketball stadiums, right? That's a lot of debris that we excavated. And as we excavate the debris, we find fragments. small fragments as small as my thumb, other pieces almost as big as a car. And everything has to be labeled, everything has to be photographed, everything has to be registered. And then we're now in the process of putting all of these pieces back together again. So if you can imagine a jigsaw puzzle of 30,000 pieces and you don't know what goes where. So this is the process that we've been engaged in. So here's a photograph taken in 2010. We had finished excavating in the first pillared hall, and we started excavating in the second pillared hall, removing all the debris. Here is the completely excavated second pillared hall. And then in 2012, we rebuilt the western wall in the second pillared hall. And within that western wall is this niche, which some Egyptologists refer to as a false door. I like to refer to it as a spirit door. It is a portal to the ancestral realm. This is what they are, and here was a statue of Asar, which sits along the central axis of this tomb. So this was the major figure that you saw when you walked into his tomb. So you are drawn through the Sankhu, through the first pillared hall, through the second pillared hall, to this image of Asar, and all around him are offering scenes where priests are bringing offerings to him so that he will receive the spirit of Kemet, whose burial chamber is about 40 feet below this underground. All of this was carved out of the living limestone bedrock. So the creation of this tomb is not architecture, it's sculpture. Sculpture. And here is the restoration phase of the Ace of Restoration Project. So all this white stone is new stone. And all the dark color stone are the fragments that we're now putting back in the places where they belong. So we rebuild the pillars, we rebuild the lintels and the posts and the cavetto and the pilasters, and then we take the fragments that we found and lay them out in the sandbox. And then once we have enough pieces identified, then these workers then will insert them in the proper place. So this is how we are rebuilding the temple tomb of Kemet. Wow. This photograph was taken in 2016 of the restored second pillared hall of Kemet. So there was nothing prior to 2010. There was nothing there. So we have rebuilt everything. So we don't have to argue and debate with anybody. All we have to do is do the work, and the work speaks for itself. Right? The work speaks for itself. And so in 2016, we had a conference where we organized a gathering of other Egyptologists who were excavating in South and North Assisi, who were also excavating 25th dynasty tombs, and brought them all together for the first time so that we can share our discoveries. Because people have a tendency to work in isolation because they're afraid sometimes that others are going to steal their information. And we created an opportunity for folks to come together and share their knowledge. And at that conference, I talked about what it meant to me to fund this work. You know, we have, African Americans have been responsible for paying for all of this. We have over 100 people on our payroll. We work 4 months out of the year. So the Egyptian people saw us and recognized us as doing work that nobody else had done to this degree. And so they see us differently. So they don't just see us as tourists coming to spend our money. They see us as tomb restorers, tomb rebuilders. And so I had to share with the audience at the podium that the fact did not escape me that at the moment that we were commemorating the restoration of Kemet's second pillared hall, at the exact same moment, on the exact same day, 6,000 miles away, President Barack Obama was commemorating the opening of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. All right? I want to connect some dots with you. All right? And I want you all to see this. I want you all to get this because something is happening right now. Right? And we don't need to get emotional. We just need to have clarity to understand what's going on so that we can decide what we're going to do. Right? So that On September 28th, 2016, that was a day that changed my life forever. In that, on the third day of the conference, or the second day of the conference, we did site visits to some of the other tombs that people were excavating and restoring. And I was tired. It was a long week. You know, I didn't feel like going to these sites, but a couple of my buddies said, "Tony, no, you need to go and visit these tombs." And what I saw blew my mind. And this is in the area of North Asasif. Here is Hatshepsut's temple right here. And I had walked past this area dozens and dozens of times and had no idea what was just around the corner. So let me just share with you, and I want you all to get it. I want you all to understand what I'm sharing with you. Inside of one of these tombs, there was this statement carved on the wall. The statement says, "To those who will yet be born, may they enter this tomb and see what is inside. You who enter this tomb, look and try to understand. Read and restore these inscriptions. Our men shall favor those who come here. He will give you life if you can read and restore these inscriptions." Now, the reading and the restoration of these inscriptions is not just a literal thing. It's about restoring the culture. It's about restoring the cultural memory. It is an invitation from 2,500 years ago to us today to come and see what is here and to use it now to transform our consciousness. So, that was just the beginning. What I found. And, you know, it's interesting that there were only 2 Africans there. And whenever I walk into a space, whenever I walk into any space, I'm always looking around. I'm studying everything, the architecture, the symbolism. I'm taking everything in, processing everything. And I'm looking around and found on the ceilings of 2 tombs in this area. I found that symbol. Wow. You all recognize this? Yes. Do you recognize what you are seeing?
Yes.
Allegory symbols in the Nile Valley in Kemet 2,300 years before they were used on the west coast of Africa. All right? So process this. Process this. Now, I want you all to stay with me. I'm stretching a little bit. You know, I'm spending a lot of time researching this, talking to people, talking about a migration from the east to the west. So there's this migration of people, culture, knowledge from the Nile to the Niger. So if these ancestors had the presence of mind to know that Kemet was going to fall, and they knew that the knowledge that they had in their possession was too important, too significant to allow to fall into the hands of the coming invaders. So they had to parcel this information and send it out. There were 6 different migrations. There's a book you all should read called Paths from the Nile, written by a colleague of Sheikh Abdul, a brother by the name of Abubakar Lam. And he documents 6 migrations out of the Nile River Valley into the Niger River Valley. And that these migrations jump-started traditions among the Ankh, among the Urals, among the Wolof. And the last migration was the migration that came into Mali and influenced the GOTA. So we can now begin to trace culturally Nile Valley knowledge in West Africa. And in conversations I've had with brothers and sisters in West Africa, I'm always digging, I'm always asking questions, asking them, what have your ancestors said about their origins? And I'm finding in Senegal, I'm finding in Nigeria, I'm finding in Ghana, I'm finding in Cameroon, I'm finding in Mali, that their ancestral record says that they came from the Nile River Valley. So we are the same people. Yeah. We just migrated from one part of the continent to another part of the continent before we were stolen away from West Africa and brought over here. Yes. So process this. I want you all to stay with me and I want you all to process this. These ancestors had enough presence of mind to know that Kemet was going to fall. and they sent this knowledge west for safekeeping, then they had to have known that West Africa was going to fall. And that those West Africans were going to be taken further west into the Americas, North America, South America, and all the islands in the Caribbean, but they would not be allowed to bring their knowledge, their culture, their language, their traditions with them. They were not able to bring it with them physically, but it is encoded in our DNA. That's real. Now, you won't find very many people talking about this publicly, but off the record, they will say that ancestral memory is real.
That's right.
And they've already identified that portion in the brain where those ancestral memories reside.
Yes.
They know it's real. So we carry within us the memory of all of those Africans dating back to 300,000 years ago. But they knew you had the capacity to know. But it's about centering your mind. It's about being clear about who you are, and more importantly, who you are not. It's being clear. And it ain't about convincing anybody of anything.
Right.
Knowing what you're supposed to do and doing it with integrity. Doing it with dignity. And so I want to take you back to this building. Because as I analyze this building, the architecture of this building, the architectonics of this building, it tells me things about this story. It tells me things about this migration from the Nile to the Niger to the Potomac. And that, as Kwame Nkrumah said, you know, we are African not because we were born in Africa, but because Africa was born in us. Nobody can take that away from us.
That's right.
Nobody can take that away from us. And if folk don't want to embrace their Africanness, then that's all right. Everybody's entitled to their right to be wrong. So don't So within this museum, you have a Adinkra symbol. And if you, hold on brother, let me talk. We have a chance for Q&A. So Adinkra is an Akan word that means to say goodbye, farewell, to the dead. It implies a philosophical message that one conveys when mourning during a funeral or post-burial memorial. So it is fitting that this Akoma Adinkra symbol, the Sankhu symbol, will be found on 2 tombs that I found thus far in Kemet. You're saying goodbye to an ancestor. And you're also extending an invitation for them to continue to come to you and teach you. Adinkra symbols have been used for about 200 years in Ghana. They reflect the philosophy, religious beliefs, social values, and political history of the Ashanti people. Right? So we resonate with these symbols because they convey messages to us. So this building, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, is a building that has a story to tell. It has a message to tell if you know how to interpret the message. So David Adjaye, the Ghanaian architect who designed this building, was inspired to create the exterior of this building, the corona, what they refer to as the corona, which is 3 inverted pyramids. And the inspiration for the exterior of this building is a Yoruba shrine post. And what you will notice in this Yoruba shrine post, you see these 3 trapezoidal shapes that he's wearing on his head. This is a priest. And to me, my interpretation of these 3 shapes represents spirit, mind, and body. Yes. So if you look at the first one, it has a hole here. That is a spirit door. That is a portal to the ancestral realm. So his job as a priest is to receive the spirit of his ancestors such that it transforms his mind, it transforms his body, and it's his responsibility or her responsibility to come into the village, to come into the community, and share this knowledge with every life that matters to you so that you can transform the character and the consciousness of those people who are ready to be transformed. This ain't for everybody. Let's be clear about this. It ain't for everybody. So, this building is not just a museum. If you really understand the architecture and the symbolism of this building, it's not just a museum, it is a shrine. It is a shrine. It's a shrine that has over 36,000 artifacts. They have Harriet Tubman's shawl. They have Nat Turner's Bible. They have an auction block. They have manacles of enslaved African men, women, and children. They have a slave cabin. They have artifacts that were used or worn by real people, our ancestors. And if you know this, anything that you come in contact with, anything that you read, anything that you wear is infused with your essence, your spirit. And so this building, as I said, is not a museum, it is a shrine house. And when you come into this space with the right consciousness, you then open yourself to receive the messages from those ancestors who are there, who are waiting for those with the right mind and consciousness to speak to, so that they can continue their work. That's the process. That's how this situation works. So I want you to get this. I want you all to get this. The creativity, the messages incorporated into the architecture. David Ajay made sure that the angle of this corona was 17 degrees. No, 70, hold on 1 second. 73 degrees in order to match the angle of the pyramidion on top of Asar's monument. So what is he doing symbolically? He is making a direct correlation between West Africa and East Africa, between the Niger River Valley and the Nile River Valley. It's a subtle message, but it's there, hidden in plain sight. So if you know what you're looking at, if you know what you're looking for, the message rings loud and clear. Here's the brother, brilliant brother, creative soul. He referred to Washington, D.C. as Karnak on the Potomac. Why? Because he knew the so-called Washington Monument and its reflection pool was copied from the Tekenu that you see standing in Karnak Temple and their reflection in their sacred land. So the knowledge of African people, the spirit of African people has literally been hidden in plain sight. It is right there before your very eyes. But in order to decipher it, in order to internalize it, in order for that spirit to resonate with you, you've got to bring something with you. It ain't about talking, it's about doing.
That's right.
It's about doing. And when you are doing what you were born on this earth to do, and you become a vessel through which the ancestors will work through in order to ensure that you do your job well. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. That's right. You do the work. That's how the process works. And so there's a statement on the website of the National Museum of African American History and Culture that speaks to this process. At its best, architecture is the physical manifestation of a culture's highest ideals. So the architecture of Washington, D.C. is a physical manifestation of the spiritual manifestation of the greatness of African people. As Kaba Khomeini says, the same hands that built the pyramids built the White House, built the Capitol, built the Washington Monument. The same people, the same spirit. And so the only way that these folk can maintain control is to have us deny the essence of who we are. Deny our African spirit. Turn away from those ancestors who have been living in you all of your life. So process this. In the lower level of the museum, there's this exhibition called The Paradox of Liberty. And you see this after you walk through the recreation of the Ma'afa, the slave ship, all of that. You're in this cramped space. So it was all designed so that you would feel claustrophobic. You would feel cramped. You would feel afraid. It's dark. And then you walk out of that dark, cramped space into a hall that's with a 70-foot high ceiling. And you see this image of Thomas Jefferson standing on a pedestal. With Toussaint Louverture over here, Benjamin Banneker over here. But underneath Thomas Jefferson is this statement, the paradox of liberty. What is the paradox of liberty? The paradox of liberty is the words written by Thomas Jefferson. All men are created equal. And endowed with their creator with certain inalienable rights. But African people were men. We were considered 3/5 of a man. That is embedded in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. That is the paradox of liberty that we have been dealing with, that our ancestors have been dealing with from the very foundation of this country. So how do you deal with this paradox? You can't point your finger at your oppressor and get mad at him for doing what he was born to do. You have to begin to realize what it is that you were born to do, and do you. Do you. So that in this exhibition, they lay out some very basic and fundamental realities. They state 12 of the first 18 presidents of the United States owned Africans. That's real. That's American History 101. Behind Thomas Jefferson, you see 609 bricks. Each of those bricks is inscribed with one of the 609 Africans that Thomas Jefferson enslaved, including the 6 children that he fathered by Sally Hemings. Wow. This is the paradox of liberty. It's a paradox for them. I'm clear about what this is. I'm crystal clear. And what else is important? And we really need to process this. We really need to understand this if we're going to do the things that we were born here to do at this particular point in time in history. We are living at a critical junction in time and space, brothers and sisters. I've never seen this degree of racism in my life. I've never seen this degree of ecological instability in my life. Things are changing forever. And we have to be ready for those changes. It's a time for change. And so, there's a statement that says, January the 1st, 1808, the United States banned the importation of Africans, right? And so I thought for a moment when I first read that maybe they had a change of heart, maybe they had a consciousness. No. It was strategic. It was economic. The reason for the ban was they were tired of giving their money to the French and the British and the German to buy the Africans that they stole. And so they banned the importation of Africans, and then they did one of the most despicable things that this United States of America has never, ever acknowledged. And that is, they started the domestic breeding of Africans. More Africans were bred in the United States than were brought over here as enslaved captives. And I want you to know, I want you to be clear that 2 of the largest slave breeding concentration camps were within 125 miles of Washington, D.C. One was on the eastern shore of Maryland, where Harry Tubman and Frederick Douglass had been enslaved. And another was right outside of Richmond, Virginia. They bred African men, women, and children like cattle in order to meet the demand for more bodies that were needed in the Mississippi after Eli Whitney, air quotes, invented the cotton gin, which now made it possible to process more cotton. It is because of this reason, because of cotton and because of the breeding of African people, that America is the wealthiest, most powerful nation on the face of this planet. It's not because God blessed America. It's because of the heinous crimes that this country committed and is yet to atone for. And so we are witnessing, brothers and sisters. We saw it this week. The disuniting of this country. So something major is coming, and it's important that you prepare yourself. Critically important that you prepare yourself. So the issue that I want to leave you with as I wind down is, it's important for us to know that to not know what happened before your ancestors were enslaved is to remain mentally enslaved. Right? And as Asa Hilliard said in his introduction to Stolen Legacy, mental slavery is worse than physical slavery, because the mental slave believes that he or she is free, never realizing that the shackles are on their minds, never realizing that they have the ability to release the shackles. But they're too caught up in the fantasy to realize who they are and what they were born to do. So then, in summary, my response to all of this is to create this new project that is going to be in our home for the last 14 years, the IKG Cultural Resource Center in Washington, D.C. We are creating a project that I am calling the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project. All right. And we are creating space. We are creating a space where we would tell our story in one of the most sacred structures in Washington, D.C. This building was known as the 12th Street Y when it was built in 1908. This building was the first colored YMCA in the world. Designed by an architect by the name of William Pittman, who was the son-in-law of Booker T. Washington, the second licensed black architect in Washington, D.C., and it was his blueprint for this building that was used as the blueprint for other YMCAs, colored YMCAs, all across the country, including Harlem YMCA. All right? So, we're going to tell the story of Dr. Clark. We're going to tell the story of the brothers and sisters who have, as Dr. Clark said, been written out of the respectable commentary of human history. And we're going to make sure that their names are never forgotten. This brother, his name is Anthony Browder. He was enslaved in a concentration camp in Prince George's County, Maryland, the county that borders Washington, D.C. This brother purchased his freedom at the age of 21 for $425. And then he came into Washington, D.C., bought a house, developed several businesses, hired other African Americans, and raised enough money to purchase his wife's freedom.
Oh, wow.
This brother worked with other brothers in the community and built a church. That church served as a stop on the Underground Railroad. This brother was responsible with a cadre of other like-minded individuals. They were responsible for establishing a colored YMCA because the YMCA, which had just been brought to the United States from England, would not allow colored people in their facilities. So he and a group of other brothers created their own YMCA. This brother, after emancipation, lobbied to create the first free school for African American children in Washington, D.C. Everybody should know this man. And so after he died, brothers who were part of his organization lobbied the National YMCA in order to get a building that would honor their legacy. And that's the building that we've been residing in for the last 14 years. That is now the Anthony Browder YMCA. And that's where we're going to have the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project. Benjamin Banneker, right? For those of you, how many of you all have ever come to D.C., take our Egypt on the Potomac field trip, all right? So that's a field trip I designed 34 years ago. After my second trip to Egypt, where I began to realize that there was a direct correlation between the architectural structures that I was witnessing in Washington, D.C., and identical structures in ancient Egypt. I did my research on the layout, design, and development of Washington, D.C., and created the Egypt on the Potomac field trip, where I've been able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the people who created the capital of the wealthiest and most powerful nation in human history were inspired by the works of our ancestors. And all of this information is literally hidden in plain sight. All right? So Benjamin Banneker had a major role to play in doing the celestial observations to create the 10-mile square that became Washington, D.C. Benjamin Banneker, his grandfather, was a young man who was stolen from his home in Mali. He was said to have been a prince. He was enslaved in Baltimore. He worked for 2 years for his enslaver, a white woman named Molly Welch. And then after 2 years, she gave him his freedom and then married him. And then they anglicized his name. His name went from Banneker to Banneker. And Benjamin Banneker was the offspring of their eldest daughter, Mary, and a formerly enslaved African. So Benjamin Banneker was a descendant of an African priest from Mali. Benjamin Banneker had within his DNA the astronomical knowledge that allowed him to do the celestial observations in order to create the 10-mile square that became Washington, D.C. So our fingerprints are all in this country. We just have to begin to understand what they are and who they are so that we can tap into that same knowledge. So our Egypt on the Potomac field trip is going to begin in April. It runs first Saturday of each month from April through November. I invite you all to come out. We're going to be opening the Clark Project. We're looking at opening it in June. I'll make sure that you all have details and invite you all to come to DC for this grand opening. We're going to have a list of essential reading for the 21st century. Because this information is not being taught in our schools right now. This information is not being taught in most of our HBCUs right now. So we have to create the spaces that we deem to be sacred spaces where we can teach this information and encourage our children to come so that they can begin to learn who they are. These are scholars who represent what I refer to as forbidden knowledge. There was an Egyptology professor at Howard University in the early 90s. She came from Georgetown. And she said that anybody in her class who did any paper with any references by any of these people, including yours truly, would get an automatic F. They hired her. All right? So we have to be clear about what's happening. And we have to be willing to create sacred spaces where we can teach our own information. That's right. Where we can honor those souls who matter to us. So the highlight of this exhibition is going to be this mural. This 25-foot-long mural that will showcase our migration from the Nile to the Niger to the Potomac. All right? And so the essence of that mural will document 5,000 years of African history. Again, I don't have to make anything up. I deal with historical facts and present them to you. Irrefutable facts that speak for themselves. And so we talk about the migration from the Nile from 3200 BC to 1200 CE. Documented facts of Africa, of the Nile River Valley, as the foundation of culture and civilization, architecture and engineering, science and philosophy. And then the migration of that knowledge to the Niger between 1200 and 1808. And then here, this knowledge is now in the Potomac. It's here in the Hudson. It's here in the Mississippi. It's here in the United States. We are the descendants of those people who would not die. So we need to understand that we're here for a purpose. And we need to understand the significance of this building. This building stands on the corner of 15th Street and Constitution Avenue. Right? 15th Street and Constitution Avenue. So we know this symbol as a tekken. Right? Tekken is the symbol that represents the resurrection of a soul. Right? A tekken is a symbol that represents masculine procreation. An inverted pyramid, these three inverted pyramids, which mirror the three pyramids, the three Mir at Giza, the inverted pyramid represents a womb. So we have, right on the corner of 15th Street and Constitution Avenue, an African symbol of male procreation, an African symbol of female procreation, which suggests to me that we have the capacity to create a new nation of a new people with a new consciousness in order to create a new world. That is what time it is. And so, I want us to not get caught up in everybody else's games and everybody else's nonsense. You're here for a purpose. Your life has value. So love yourself. Be true to yourself. And then remember, if I can paraphrase that statement that was found in that tomb from the 25th Dynasty tomb, I want to say that to my descendants, the ancestors are saying this to us, to my descendants, as you enter this sacred space and see what is inside, to understand what I have left for you, it is pleasing to the ancestors. We're not here to party. We're not here to waste our time, waste our life. We're here because someone along our family line did not die. You're here for a purpose. Your life has value. And it's pleasing to the ancestors that you are here. And when you recognize that, when you live that truth, they will give you life as long as you remember that these ancestors reside in you. You're never alone. You're never by yourself. You have the message to live, breathe, speak.
Anthony Browder. If there are any questions for either Naswt or, and we understand it's late, but you might have some questions. Also, before we get to questions, please take down this information. And something that was placed on Abitakaya's heart, and I agree, is that if anyone would like to give to the project, he is right here. And if you could tell us how we can donate to the project, we really appreciate that, because I know a lot of us carry cards now, but we should really and truly put into this. It is our history, our legacy. So it's really important that if you are sitting here tonight, there's something that brought you here, and so we have to make sure we continue this. So we are asking that you do give to the project and you share more with us. So are there any questions from the audience? Yes.
Thank you so much. Very popular YouTube personality, Graham Hancock, the late John Anthony West. They do this work. Do they know what you know?
let me say this. I respect the work of John Anthony West. I respect the work of Graham Hancock. They are brilliant people, right? And they have access. I've had the chance to hang out with Robert Laval and Thomas Brophy, and I can tell you, with all honesty, they got access to information that we would never get access to.
Yeah, right.
And so it's important to cultivate relationships with people, right? It's important to get access to information so that you can then share that information with those with the greatest need to know. So it ain't about competition. It ain't about hating the folk. It's about accessing the information and using that information to liberate your mind, liberate your body, and liberate your soul. That's what's important to me. Yes. All right. With regards to the Ancient Restoration Project, you can go to our website and you can make a contribution online. You can go. There's a link, and you can go directly to PayPal and make a contribution. It is tax deductible, right? And so we have made it as easy as possible for people to be a part of history. And I encourage you all to do so. And I've got some books and materials, so after we finish with this, I'll be outside. And I've got some material. I got my daughter's newest book, which came out last month. As you all know, my daughter went to Egypt with me when she was 1989, when she was 7 years old. Wrote her first book when she was 8. And so at that time, my daughter was the youngest published author in America. And so I trained my daughter, I raised my daughter. So that she's now been to Egypt with me 14 times. She's been working with me in the tombs for the last 9 years. And I can tell you, 2010, just the two of us were 70-something feet underground in the burial chamber of Karakamene, finding some incredible things, having some very serious daddy-daughter time. And then she asked me, Dad, why are we here? Why are we doing this? And I shared with her what was in my heart. We're here because we're supposed to be here. We're here because it is time for this tomb to be excavated. It is time for this tomb to be restored. And we just happen to be the vessels to which this work is happening. And so her latest book is out, Reflections of My First Trip to Africa. I'll have it on the table outside when we're through with the Q&A. Brother, you have a question?
Yes, you said we were stolen from Africa. That's what you said. But you forgot to say that we were sold by our own people before they stole us.
Okay, so context. There were some misguided Africans who there were some who worked in concert with the enemy. So in every situation, you know, you got your Judases. You got your traitors. That's nothing unique. That is nothing unique. And so the issue is that these Africans who sold some of their brothers and sisters typically sold them as prisoners of war, but they did not build the slave dungeons. There's 138 slave dungeons along the coast of West Africa. They did not build any of the slave ships. They did not build any of the manacles. So they were not a part.
What's happening?
Brother, look, so
the Jews had the slave ships, but that's not the point.
what's your point?
The point is they knew when they captured our brothers and took them to these places to be helped put on the slave ships, they realized what was going on.
So what's your point? So what's your point?
So why don't we always talk about Africa didn't do all that good to us?
Well, I disagree because I've had, come on folks, I've cultivated some meaningful relationships with Africans all around the continent, and I'm not going to let one or two bad apples spoil or taint the entire continent. So you got to dominate the conversation. Sister, your question, please.
Thank you for sharing Dr. Browder.
Tony.
I had the first privilege of reading your book as a student here 20-something years ago. My professor, her name was Nubia, and the extent they did not, one student, Jewish student, the true Jews look like me, brought, not only was she offended by some of the things, they decided they would deport the black teacher, Professor Nubia, from Medgar Evers College, right? So that's how I was first introduced to you before I met you, through your book, right? Now, the purpose, I was going to ask you, who was the first person that entered the tools that you found, and the reason why you chose that person?
Well, burial chamber. So what I've done, when my daughter and I are at the site and we find a new burial chamber, I always make it a point to allow my daughter to go in first, so that history will record that my daughter was the first African American inside these burial chambers.
Judy?
Thank you. First, Dr. Browder, your presentation was dynamic. I do want to share with you, I actually had the pleasure of teaching a course from the curriculum created from Nile Valley Contributions to Civilizations, and yet taking students on the Potomac trip. My question, especially with the new course, well, I'm going to say course, but from the Nile to the Niger to the Potomac, are you creating a textbook or any educational material that could be taught from that?
Perfect. Love it. So this is the plan. We will create a textbook that would document everything that we have within that space. My daughter, who is, she taught elementary school, high school, and middle school. She will write the curriculum. And we want this space to be a focal point for schools and adults. We want them to come here and see what they're not getting in other facilities so that they begin to understand who they are. And we want to be able to provide the text that we write, that we have researched, that we publish, and make it available to anyone who wants access to this information. So I believe in controlling our own destiny, and what better way to do that than to create those things that I know add value to my life. Like, thank you, man.
Sorry, no more questions. So sorry. But before we leave, Anthony Browder, we have a little token, a little gift for you.
A little gift?
Just a little one. But it's, so, most of you may not know, but I just started a company, and the website is up. It's called Get Laced. And it's about 5G protection, protecting ourselves from the low frequency waves that make us go crazy or put subliminal messages within our children's minds, and also our minds. It also helps to protect us like against radiation, EMF waves, and things like that. So I would like to use these Get Laced.
Thank you.
So, Brother Tony Browder, you just got laced.
I just got
All right, so we'd like to thank you tremendously for coming out, for spending some time with us. Tony Browder will have his book outside. Also, the Temple of Anu has a marketplace if you're interested in buying products. So you can, as you go out, you can communicate and buy and spend. And thank you so much. And the flyer for the calendar for all of our events in Medgar Evers, Black History Month, is also outside. We look forward to seeing you more. Thank you so much and have an amazing night. Thank you.
Thank you for the building blocks you left us. It's your spirit possessed us. Show you blessed us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.